So, good day and welcome to AI Sana Industry Knowledge Model. I'm Elena Sidich and I'm very pleased to welcome our very special guest today, Joe Ward, Account Director at Snowflake. Joe brings nearly 20 years of experience in enterprise technology and client-facing roles, including work at Dell, Amazon, MuleSoft, and now Snowflake. So today we are speaking with someone who has spent years helping large organizations walk through very real technology, data, and transformation challenges. Snowflake is one of the world's leading data and AI platform companies. In simple terms, the company has organizations bring together the data, systems, and teams so they can use data and AI in a much more connected and effective way. As of March 2026, Snowflake's market capitalization is about $57 billion. Warren Buffett also invested around Snowflake's IPO in 2020, which drew a lot of attention because Buffett had made very few investments in enterprise technology. And Reuters described Snowflake's debut as the largest US listing of that year. I also was investing in that IPO. I think I got like more than six. I don't remember exact number, but it was good. So this is a very interesting conversation for us because we are not only discussing technology, but also how large companies are trying to make AI useful in the real world at scale with all the complexity that comes with that. John, thank you very much for joining us today. Let me first hand it over to you for the presentation, and then I will come back with a few follow-up questions from the customer and market perspective.
Great.
So
Elena, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. So I'll walk through the presentation today. I'll talk a little bit about what is Snowflake, some of the challenges that we're solving, and how people are using artificial intelligence today. And then, yeah, welcome any questions. So if I just kind of jump in, who am I, right? I think you did a very flattering introduction. So I had to do the math the other day. I realized, yeah, I've been doing this for near 20 years, which makes me feel old. That was pretty fun. I started at Dell at the early days of VMware, so I spent the beginning of my career learning how to build a data center, learning how to do virtualization. So I very much understand, kind of the infrastructure challenges of today's society. Then I moved to AWS back when it was a line item on the balance sheet called Other, and I helped people kind of deconstruct the data center and move to cloud. So again, the early days of kind of what is cloud, why cloud, and then eventually which cloud. After that, I moved to MuleSoft, which was more API-based data integration. So I really liked the idea of taking big applications, breaking them into small little pieces, and then how to use those pieces to build new things at pace and at scale. I joined Snowflake. So at Snowflake, I work in the AI data cloud, where I'm helping large organizations build a single source of truth and then leverage that data to extract value out of it into business processes and business outcomes by using AI, analytics, machine learning, so on and so forth. I got my bachelor's degree at Texas Tech in business management, and recently I finished my postgrad in artificial intelligence at the University of Oxford. Yeah, welcome anyone to reach out to me on LinkedIn or what have you. I'm not the fastest at responding, but I welcome any and every engagement.
Thank you.
So yeah, appreciate it. So Snowflake, right? I think this is just a good little overview of the AI data cloud today. I mean, effectively, what customers are doing is they are bringing data into Snowflake, and that comes from all sorts of systems. So think your CRM system to a spreadsheet to maybe it's SharePoint, Gmail, your ERP system, your proprietary databases where you've got maybe Oracle or you've got a mainframe or you've got SQL databases, all and the like. We're transforming them. You're running analytics on the top. So think, how are you reporting your financials to the street? We are handling transactions of all scale. And then, of course, we've got artificial intelligence layered on top of that, and customers bring various applications into the AI cloud, as well as collaborate with their team and their peers. It's a fully managed service. We work on all the major clouds, so the same kind of UI, whether you're in Azure, you're in Google, or you're in AWS, which is great. We're interoperable, so that means that the data can easily work across Snowflake and other platforms. Not about kind of closing everybody into a proprietary environment, but working together with everybody. And we'll talk why that's important here in a minute. And we're a secure and governed platform, right? So it's the same kind of security first scaffolding that works across any of the clouds that is a main reason or a big reason why customers trust in us and work with us. So we're growing quite quickly. As you can see here, we've got over 13,000 customers working with us globally. A high percentage of those are using our AI solutions, and we continue to grow at an extremely rapid pace, which makes it a very exciting and fun time to be at the organization. And I would say, on the far right, some of the products we'll talk about today, Snowflake Intelligence and a bit of Cortex Code. Those are really where we're starting to bring the application of technology and artificial intelligence to the end users and delivering immense value. And you can see how quickly that is being adopted across the platform and our customer base, which is providing disruptive value to the end users and to the businesses. So why do people choose us? We touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but the platform is known for being easy. We try to take the complexity out of managing all the knobs yourself, so to speak, and providing more of an intuitive and easy platform to work with. So democratizing various bits of technology. We believe in making things transparent so everybody can see exactly what's happening and how they're influencing not just the financials, but the governance that they need to deliver on. It's a connected platform, as I mentioned. We work on all the clouds. We work with our competitors. It's not always about, in today's world, getting all the data and putting it in your little island. It's really about breaking down those silos of data and making it easily accessible so that you can extract value from that. A highly complex environment, and you end up with silos of data everywhere. It's really hard to pull those insights out and translate it into customer or business user value. It also becomes really hard for that business user to trust the data. Right? So often, I think we've all worked at a company where we want to use the system, but we end up just saying, well, Excel is faster. So I'll just pull the data out and I'll just work in Excel and I have my own little spreadsheet. And that becomes my source of trust, not the company systems. So we want to help solve that problem. And of course, it's a trusted platform. Everything is governed in role-based access controls. We provide all the compliance and security necessary for the largest organizations in the world to use our platform. Some just token shot of brands, which I thought were quite cool. As a technologist myself, I think it's pretty cool that OpenAI uses us. I'm a big fan of Under Armour. Certainly, who doesn't like EA Sports and the video games, and all that type of it. Just tons of amazing companies on here that we have the opportunity to work with and serve. And obviously, we continue to grow, so organizations see the value that we're providing. And continue to move our way and scale. So why does Snowflake exist at all? So I tried to put this in there to kind of, set the scene and then also talk about the bigger picture. Technology is constantly changing, right? There are always waves of disruption. So again, it's like as it relates to my career, right? First, there was on-premise. So everybody had their own manufacturing plant, right? In this case, it was a data center that provided IT. Back in the old days, it was the power plant that powered their line, so on and so forth. Then we had the disruption of cloud computing, which is more utility-based. So same using that energy analogy, we went from, I have my own power plant. Well, there's new technology, alternating current, and now we have the rise of the utilities. I no longer need my power plant to power my manufacturing line, because I get it from a utility because frankly it's better, faster, cheaper. Yeah. Then we had multiple competitors in the space. And so then we started to look at, okay, well, how do I leverage all the different competitors so that I have, say, better geographic coverage? I've reduced my risk of maybe an outage in one location, or I start to have data sovereignty concerns. Right? Or do I want my data in America, or do I need it in Germany or Ireland or London or Paris or so on and so forth, right? Like maybe I need a certain set of data to always be accessible in Tokyo. So anyhow, all these things kind of continue. And the challenge with technology is when you start to buy into one, it creates a new silo, a new layer to the cake. If you if you're not careful, you can get very quickly stuck in tech debt, right? Where you've locked yourself into a new set of technologies and capabilities, which may be great in the moment, but 3 to 5 years from now, you could find yourself quickly dated. An ability to have an agile environment that kind of keeps up with the times, if you will, and that's why I mentioned interoperability. That's why these things start to come into play and start to matter. So enter Snowflake.
Oh,
By our
Joe,
very nature.
Joe, I'm sorry. Can you return to that slide? I just want to highlight, maybe like understandable for you, but not for everybody. So we're showing this is the evolution, and still there are BI specialists exist, and they're still doing some work. But does it still need, like this BI? Because now AI is so like good, like and faster, can like arrange all data like as you want. But why still BI? I mean, like it will be used or like it's already obsolete in your opinion?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking. I would say that there's two things to play back here. Dial-up internet still exists as well, right? And many people would say, "Oh, wow, I had no idea because I've moved well past that," right? But there's clearly still a need, and then there's still a service that is providing value to a subset of customers. I think when we talk about business intelligence, largely we started with um,
Yeah.
I think as we're seeing the diffusion of artificial intelligence, right, we're getting to the point now where we can start to use natural language to create the dashboards and interrogate the data, right? So we can ask, well, yeah, I see my marketing campaign had a good response. Why, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we start to that more evolved answer that we probably didn't get with just a dashboard. I don't think that means the dashboard is no longer a requirement or no longer provides value. I think perhaps the scope of which it provides value becomes relevant to a smaller subset of individuals and use cases, whilst a new technology starts to expand.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you for answering.
Yeah, yeah. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I'd say hey, light bulbs didn't always kill the candle, right? The candle's still here. So I would just kind of use the same one.
Yeah. Understand. So let's let's.
So I know this slide might be a bit much for some of the folks, but look, the point here is as you think about technology, you always end up in kind of an architectural design, and you want to be thinking about, geez, my business is going to get ever more complex. I'm going to have all sorts of different types of data sets, multiple environments, different coding languages, so on and so forth. I need to think about how I build an architecture that is adaptable across the environment today and has the malleability ability. I'm not saying that correctly, but the ability to be transformed for the environment of tomorrow. And this is one of the things that makes Snowflake unique. We separate the compute from the storage, so we start to decouple all the components necessary so they can scale individually. We use a single engine for computation, right? So think you're running analytics. When you have multiple environments, multiple things you're trying to achieve, multiple languages, oftentimes you end up with a bunch of specialized computing engines to manage that, amplify everything into a single. We don't lock into any single cloud provider or any single location. We provide it as a managed service, so it's not about just having the technology and then having to manage all the minutiae or the underlying components that make it work. We again extract that right for you and deliver it in a simplified experience so that you don't have to be a specialist in in AWS and Azure and so on and so forth. And we provide it as a single governance pane, right, to meet all the security, the compliance, and the regulatory environments that you would work across globally. Okay, and then the last bit on Snowflake. This is a little bit on what the kind of environment looks like. Again, showing that we're cross cloud. We work across all different types of data. For those that can maybe want to think about this, unstructured data are things like PDFs, pictures, text messages. Semi-structured is more things that I often think of like a computer language, like a JSON, right? And then structured data, columns, rows, tables. Think spreadsheets, but at scale. Yeah, and then we have different formats, different types of tables, different ways that we go about storing the data to make it accessible to the business, different languages. Then we catalog the data so that a technologist can quickly find the right data set for the right job, but equally a business user can start to access that data through a marketplace. Think Amazon.com or the Apple Store for data sets, right? I want my finance data and I want my sales data. Okay, cool. I want to put them together and I want to achieve. So I'll stop there, and then what I really want to focus on is artificial intelligence from then on out and how people are leveraging it to get value. So if I just jump to the next slide, I think this is a really interesting one. Look, as we see the diffusion of technology and artificial intelligence and where people are going, we started with a bit of maybe automation, tools that automate various little bits of our work, right? And then we had chatbots where the human is doing, say, 80% of the work, and AI is there to support them. So the co-pilot that everybody's seen, 80-20, right? I do the work, I ask a question, it helps me, we work faster. And I think we're starting to get to the point where we're seeing the inverse of that, where the AI tools will do about 80% of the work, and then 20% will be the human checking their homework, right? So I go send you a task, it completes that task in an asynchronous way, right? I go pour myself a cup of coffee, I work on another task, and then I come back and it's achieved that task, and I just make sure that it's accomplished it correctly. So I try to define that because it changes the bandwidth, right? Equation. So when labor is no longer tied to, my ability to work, but I can offset a portion of that labor, that means that my ability to be productive scales quite rapidly. Does
Mhm.
that, does
Can,
that make sense?
can, yeah, like, can we stop here? I have a couple of questions to clarify. So this is student and strategy. 60%, you think it will be AI?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of it will be, we're maybe putting a prompt in or we've built an agent to execute a particular function, and it needs to use the contextual awareness, right, which is providing it data to then define how to achieve that in the most, judicious manner possible.
Refining graduals 30%. Why it's like different below? Because it's like AI altogether with human.
Can you ask me that
Or
question one more time?
yeah, this is like second one, 30%
Yeah.
refining graduals. So like why it's different color? Because it's like AI will be with human doing that. Just because
Yeah.
it's different.
Well, I think that there's also an area there where you start to build recursive loops, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so when you have an AI agent go execute a command,
Mm.
but the command doesn't come out the correct way, right? And there's an exception to the rule, then it needs to go back and say either run it again or go through the steps, right?
Mm.
And I think maybe a
Mm-hmm.
nice way to see this is like, sometimes in chatbots today, like the ones that have high level of reasoning, it will show the reasoning, go down, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, well, look, that is the steering and strategy on how it's trying to achieve the prompt that you've given it. Now, when it's trying at the guardrails, sometimes it'll check to say, oh, can I go to this tool? The answer's not in that tool, right? It's not in that data set. I need to go to a different one. I need to check here. Actually, I need to reroute myself because I didn't get something correct, right? I think we can see that and we can start to kind of break that into two different bubbles. And then when it provides the response to say, hey, Joe, here's what I've done, here's what I want to do. Do you agree with this? Yes or no? That approval rate is us. Now, to be fair as well, like I think all these numbers are debatable, right? And they're all going to change at a really rapid pace. So I would just say take it with a grain of salt. I think the big picture here is, how does labor change over a period of time, and how do we get work done? And what is that division of labor?
So just like to like finalize. So this is, in your opinion, 60% it will be AI doing by itself, 30% it will be AI plus human, and 10% just human.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair today.
So
But I think ask me in 3 months, and we'll see how much has changed. Yeah.
no, I agree with you. It makes sense. Like what you just said. I also think that it's really real. It's real. It depends like when will it be. But what I'm seeing in my organization also now with transforming all that things. So I also see that pretty much like this like also percentage. Okay, let's move to the next point.
Yep. So look, I think the key message here that I want to get across is context is king. Yeah. The models are very smart. They're getting smarter by the day. So I don't want to take anything away from the model. But I think the more context you can give that model, you will see a better outcome. And context in this case is data, right? So how do we get the right data, put descriptions around that data to make it AI ready so that the models can leverage that data to get you to the outcome that you're looking to achieve in a reasonable way. And I think that's incredibly important, and I don't want to skip over that. So how does this kind of work in reality, right? So I'm going to talk about a few of these things over a period of time. I like to go bottoms up, right? But again, context is the data. So we talked about Snowflake earlier. It's about breaking down all those silos of data that live in our personal lives. They live in an organization. They just kind of get bigger at scale, right? Time someone goes and says, "Oh, I'm going to use this new application," great. There's data being created there that could be brought in to a tool that leverages AI to build context on that to help answer a question faster. And we see that all the time. There is a semantic understanding, and so it's a very important one because if you think of semantics, really it's the dictionary. Think of it as a data dictionary, right? Oftentimes, we may do something as simple as say like, as an American who moved to England, I had to go 1 p.m. suddenly turned into 1300, right? But it means the same thing. It's that semantic understanding to know that they mean the same thing. And how do you do that across different data sets so that Meta is Facebook is Meta, 1300 is 1 p.m. and so on and so forth. So you want to build that out at scale. Of course, it's important to know the procedures and the workflows to achieve outcomes in any business. And then, of course, you want your data highly connected. When we kind of go up to the top, these are things that you see kind of AI do, right? It's about retrieval. They do planning nowadays. They do reasoning over the top. How do we do the kind of what if scenarios? And how do you do evaluations to make sure that you're getting the right responses and that you continuously improve over a period of time? And then we get to the interface by which people actually interact with these tools. And I'll show you a couple, or we'll talk about a couple later today. But I think we see this all the time, whether we're using a tool and it's embedded and we ask a question and we get a response. We press a button, what's the customer churn perspective, right? And feedback comes and we don't necessarily see it. Or it's more of a chatbot experience where we go type something in, like a Chat GPT or a Claude or what have you, and we get the response. And then, of course, because this is Snowflake, we'd obviously talk about all the compliance, the guardrails, how to make sure everything is logged, how there's explainability, so how you can bring this to market in a safe, secure way that meets the requirements and the watermark that any business would truly have. This is kind of what it looks like. So we're going to kind of walk through a couple of these, but I wanted to give everyone just a quick snapshot. Again, context in the bottom. So how do we get the data in? How do we manage the data? How do we start to do some workflows on top of the data? And that could be skills, right, where you've built out a repeatable workflow. Then you kind of start to put the next layer on it, and we start to add that intelligence layer. So how do we orchestrate the data? How do we take structured data sets and do text to SQL, which is an easy way to think about this. And this becomes very important when it comes to how do I trust the responses I get, and how do I have explainability back to a regulator or to my customers that my answer is correct. An LLM is non-deterministic. So it uses probabilities to understand what the expected outcome is. Code is deterministic. So 2 plus 2 always equals 4, right? So when you do SQL, like a SQL query, That is a deterministic response to pulling the data. Text to an LLM is non-deterministic. So effectively what we're doing is we're going to ask the LLM a question. It will run a SQL query, right? It will take that text, turn it into code, and then it will provide us a deterministic response. So, you always had 100 million in sales or $10,000 in sales in a non-deterministic wrapper. That is super important
Mm-hmm.
because then you can trust the response you get. You have explainability of where the data came from and why, right? And you can log all those SQL calls, right? Who made them? When did they make them? What was this response? So you start to have that explainability back to the business. The same thing works in unstructured data, but in unstructured data, we're doing it more in citations, right? So you've probably always seen, well, okay, it gave me a response, this article says the sky is blue, right? And then we see that little thing on the bottom where it referenced that. So we can click that, it'll pull up the sheet, right? The PDF or whatever the article is. And then we can see, okay, it pulled it right from here. That's effectively a super important thing. And then how do we orchestrate that all together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very
And of
interesting.
course, yeah. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
No, no, I don't have questions. Like really good picture of architecture, like kind of like from this helicopter loop. It's like a really good one.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, we can work with different models, right? So the market changes all the time. It's much easier to bring the model to your data than bring your data to the model. Of course, these models are inside Snowflake, so they stay within that security perimeter, as opposed to having to go outside, connect to a set of APIs, pull it back and forth, right? And then we've talked about a bit on the kind of the scaffolding that provides it all together. This is kind of high level what I just talked about from left to right. So again, if I just kind of walk through, we've got data coming in, right? We're structuring the data. So again, let's say, okay, I've got a variety of databases. I'm going to take those databases, I'm going to translate them or transform them, I'm going to structure them, and I'm going to have highly curated data sets, right? Now on those data sets, and that's kind of, I pulled the data in, I've done the data engineering, which I just explained. Now I'm going to put semantics over the top. So I'm going to put that dictionary, right, that explains what's actually in that table. What does it mean? How would I use it? Why would I use it? Now, how do I retrieve that data, right? Which then becomes code. So the SQL we talked about, right? We talk AI SQL here. Within the SQL code, we can put in LLM functions, or we can go like basically execute a set of code. So like aggregate, summarize. So we'll use some examples later, but think I might want to summarize a table. Okay, cool. Give me a high level summary. But I can write that actually in my code. So it executes the code, gives me the summary, and provides me the summary without me having to tell it to summarize. And then of course we have the agents by which do the work over the top. And then how do we share that back? Whether that's through common interfaces like Slack or Teams, or we build a web page, or we use Snowflake Intelligence or some other tooling to help you, but that becomes the UI interface. Similar process with unstructured data, right? So you can think of some really cool stuff here as you start to think, oh, well, how does this apply to me? I work with insurance providers quite often. So unstructured data set might be, look, I got in a car accident and I took a photo of the broken windshield, right? Okay, cool. I've got the photo. Now I need to process that broken windshield, right? And pull that out and put that in another data set. And then I need to maybe take another data set that has like another piece of data in there that's the policy number written down. I want to extract that and I want to put those two things together. Broken windshield, policy number, client name, right? Because I'm preparing the data to maybe run it through a model to tell me, is this fraud or is this real? What's the value of this, right? So on and so forth. And that becomes kind of the tool use in the orchestration. And then I'm basically surfacing it back to business user, which in this case, the example I gave, maybe that's a claims agent, right? But we can start to kind of see that, and then we can combine the two, right? So we're combining our structured data sets and our unstructured data sets. And so we start to kind of reason over over both sets of data and pulling it all together.
Yeah, I just have a question. Do you have some legal firms who are using your software? Because
Yeah.
this is like semantic, like it's like needed to link. It's a lot of unstructured data. There it's like mainly unstructured, and like to link, like what this case, for example, could be regulated with, or like what kind of like articles regulate that, and to find it. So they're using it.
Yeah, you can imagine with unstructured data sets, a lot of like research and knowledge retrieval, and then a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, how do I have it set up in ways that then I can extract certain things out and then package them all together, right? So here's my citations across multiple cases for a challenge that I'm seeing, in court, right? And then I think
Mm-hmm.
what gets really interesting is, look, we've got the difference between first party data, which is, say, my proprietary data, and third party data, right?
Yeah.
Which is a publicly available data or data I can acquire by purchase. Maybe I'm an attorney and I have all my own case data, and then I
Mm-hmm.
have all the public case data. So I pull
Yeah.
in a library of information and then I work with that over my own private stuff. And there could be examples where I've got all the cases that I've worked on and I have saved them to my Google Drive or my
Mm-hmm.
SharePoint environment.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be very hard for a data scientist to, if they got access to that data, using something like Snowflake to tie it all together, to start to do, say, feature extraction over the top, which is to say, okay, well, I want to look at that data and I want to take certain bits of it out, right? So I'm looking for, I don't know, a case of the missing water bowl. And this is my dog's water bowl is right here in front of me. So I look for all the water bowl cases and I can find maybe patterns in that data that give me insights or intellectual property that other people don't have. Now I'm going to go and put that in a structured data set, right? And I'm going to have a highly curated set of data for those types of cases. And I start to build that knowledge base up. And so I can
Mm-hmm.
take, say, seemingly like old or meaningless data, right? And I can start to build, curated data sets that I can feed into machine learning models to help me answer questions that give me a advantage in my business and what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's a good example. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, so just a couple use cases I thought I would share just to help bring some of these things to life. These are all just finance organizations, but they're all out there. They're all pretty relevant. This is S&P Global looking over call transcript information from long periods of time, and then running models over the top, extracting information, and then building the tables to just start to answer business questions on those conversations, which I think is quite cool. You can imagine any scenario where you have a call center or say chatbots or really just anywhere where you have the customer interact with your business, whatever that interaction looks like, whether it's text, speech, or what have you, all the different modalities. How do you start to take that information, categorize it, extract value out of it? Who are the customers that reach out? Why are they reaching out? Is it actually they all have the exact same problem and they reach out this way? Can I think about how do I solve that problem before they reach out, like before they get to the point of complaint? Or is it actually my worst customer is always the one who reaches out to me, and my most profitable customers never talk to me? Why? Do I want to think about how I take lessons learned and apply them? So anyhow, I always think that's quite cool. And then we got another one with the JP Morgan Chase here, where we have put data into Cortex Analyst. So we're doing the text to SQL over the top, and here we are talking to the data, right? And we're showing that how is the business user interrogating their data to get to answers. And we see the SQL query, right? So we see the explainability, we get the results, so on and so forth. This one is super super common.
Please,
Just a couple.
uh, Joe, please leave that slide because it's showing like how the person is asking question, and how the platform is giving the
Results, yeah,
answer.
right.
Actually, it's like yeah, here. So Fusion can now generating response. Okay. So like this is the demonstration of the product, because It's like saying better than all explanations. Okay.
Right. It's structured data, text to SQL, AI agent reasoning over the top to provide them that level of response with the explainability, and then sharing it back to the end user in a table format. And they could switch it, as you saw, from like a line graph to a bar graph. They can ask questions of the information, so on and so forth. Here are just a couple other use cases. If people are thinking, oh well, like what's the data sets? How do I kind of turn this into business value? What I would say is it's the application of AI ever more so. I see more and more with the domain expert, right, can apply their knowledge of what am I trying to solve and how do I solve it to leverage AI to improve their productivity. It's always difficult when you have an IT team trying to guess what the business needs and a business team trying to guess, do I have the technology and the people and the process to deliver this outcome? So bringing people together to have those conversations, I think is a big value. So I wanted to show a little bit about kind of what this looks like, right? This comes back to the conversational intelligence by surfacing it in Snowflake Intelligence. So as a very similar to the JP Morgan Chase, right? This is a tool we use. I use it every single day in my office. Again, I'm breaking down all those data silos. I'm pulling data into Snowflake, and then I've got agents sitting over the top of the data sets, structured, unstructured, semi-structured, so on and so forth. I've given my AI tools like go search the internet, right? Go do this, go do that. And then I am surfacing it with Snowflake Intelligence as my UI. And through there, I am interrogating the data. I'm asking questions. I'm reasoning over the top and understanding why things happened. So one area that I think is kind of cool, and I guess I'll get to that here in just a second, but you can kind of think, again, here it is for different types of users, right? So
Mhm.
how everyone might use it. I think in the conversation we're having is mostly this left one. And earlier today, you asked about, is BI still relevant, right? Well, yeah, it's still relevant, but we're seeing a convergence, right, of AI and BI coming together. We're
Mm.
seeing a rationalization of how many dashboards do I truly need, and how do I manage the incoming needs of the business. I could just create dashboards for everything, or I could start to give them something like Snowflake Intelligence where they can ask those questions and become self-service, right, to get the answers they need and build their own dashboards. So anyhow, we talked a little bit about that. When it comes to builders, it's a lot of the things we talked about. It's creating the tools that the business user can use to go get the information. So an MCP server is a model context protocol. But the easiest way to think about that is, like, say I have a Snowflake, a Salesforce environment and a Snowflake environment, and I want my Snowflake environment to go talk to my Salesforce environment and pull information from there, or have an agent in that environment go execute something for me. You would typically do that over MCP. So if you see it in the industry, you kind of now have an idea of where it's working. And then another example is kind of the admin. And this just gets back to, okay, well, how do I deliver this stuff to my end users? But then also, how do I manage this in a business, right? So do I have role-based access controls on who can see what? So that, like, say me as a user, I listed all those beautiful customers that we have. I should not be able to see their information, and I can't, right? Because role-based access controls strictly provide access to the right data to the right person through that governance protocol. Yeah. And so there's no reason I should have access to everybody's data, in which I don't, right? So you want that type of strong governance, data masking, so on and so forth. You want tooling for authentication. You want tooling for financial ops, right? These things aren't free, and so you want to manage and control and provide budget and governance back to a company.
So if you can stop on that slide, I just want to describe in the simpler words for main business user. BI is like before to implement the BI, you needed to connect some data, like kind of like do some settings. Some specialists were doing BI, not everybody were doing, and it's like kind of like when you do these dashboards, they are just stable. I mean, data is changing once it's like where it's getting from, but it's kind of stable dashboards. But here it's like much easier way. You put data and it's like building your dashboards like in the real time, like in one, like second or like 2 seconds. And after that, you can also like ask, it's kind of a live dashboards because you can ask questions if you don't see, like some answers. For me, as a CEO of the company, I'm usually like when people describe something or like explaining with the data, I have another questions, and they cannot answer it right away. They need to go, like again, like take it from somewhere, like bring it at least one day. But here you can interrogate, how you saying interrogate, ask the like AI right away, about other maybe some anomaly or like why is that happened. And it's like really useful for business user who is doing, I mean, like making decisions for example, like CEOs or like directors of some units. So it's like really valuable information. But I have one more question here. Maybe I needed to ask that earlier about this cloud. Like, and you had these big banks as a clients, but banks usually they really, like worry about the privacy, about this confidentiality, and they often prefer to do it like on premise. But how like do this security for banks and or like big enterprises in cloud? This is also the question.
Yeah, well, it goes back to we're secure by design, right? And that is kind of ground zero in the starting point. And actually,
Mm,
financial services is one of our strong customer bases
yeah.
because they see not just the value that we provide to them in the organizations, but the role-based access controls, right? That level of compliance and then secure by design and kind of all the regulatory environments, giving them the tools to meet those, right? Full audit logs, understanding of everything everybody's doing. We're actually oftentimes raising the watermark for the security and the compliance that they can
Mm,
provide,
mm,
easing the burden for providing the information about what's happening in the environment so they can deliver that back to the regulator at pace.
mhm,
The reality is, whilst maybe on the outside or when you're kind of naive to the tooling, you'd say the cloud's scary. I have this box here that I can see. I understand what the blinking lights are doing, right? When we actually take a customer through or a prospect through, well, this is what we offer and how we do it. And this is how that translates into you achieving these outcomes. We provide a step function level difference to them. And then it becomes a very easy conversation where they understand, okay, wow, I can provide the information back to the regulators faster. I have a
mhm,
more secure environment actually in the cloud than I do on premise.
mm,
I can achieve my compliance standards in a much simpler way. That becomes a really, really powerful kind of statement, if you will. And
mhm,
typically, the CISO, right, the Chief Security Officer,
mhm.
is often one of our number one champions.
Okay, understand. Let's move then.
Sure. So I just wanted to give this kind of example as, we talked about the technology, we talked about use cases, but maybe I could bring it to life a little bit. So as an employee at Snowflake, I use this sales agent, which we call it Raven. It's built on Snowflake intelligence
Mhm,
using all the tools that we described, right? And you can kind of see the behind the scenes there, where I have access to the data sets I'm allowed to have access to, right? That my role provides an individual contributor working with a small subset of customers. I have engines, I have contextual awareness, and then I have the AI sitting on the top. So effectively, you might say we've taken and broken down the data silos. We've built the AI agents reasoning over the top with all the different types of data sets. And then myself as a user, when I log in, I'm grounded in that user profile that gives me access to certain tools, certain data sets, right? All kind of isolated to my role. So I'm governed, everything I do is logged, it's full observability, the whole 9 yards. And then it's all surfaced through Snowflake intelligence. And then, on the left, you can see some of the business outcomes that we've been able to achieve. So yeah, I live this every day. I think it's a fantastic tool. I use it to help my customers. I showcase it with my customers. It helps me do my job, better, faster, cheaper, I suppose, by increasing my productivity.
Mm-hmm. I just not really clear what this agent is doing, honestly. But I understand that you have a limitation what you can tell, because it's maybe like internal. But in terms of function, what it help you with? What's the function?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So let's start with something really easy. Maybe it's
Yeah.
I get a question that's, "Hey Joe, how do I achieve X in the tool?" Yeah. Well, because I'll have Snowflake intelligence, I'll ask it. Customer wants to, I don't know. We talked a little bit about security and compliance, right? They want to enhance their compliance in this manner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Snowflake Intelligence has the data on, say, best practices, some of
Mm.
the,
Okay.
right? Like this, so then it can use that context to help me answer the customer question. And then I can
Mm-hmm.
look at that and say, oh, okay, cool. Like maybe if it's missing context, I could provide it myself, right? Because I can
Mm-hmm.
change the response. Or actually, the more data it's grounded in, the better it has contextual awareness to help
Mm-hmm.
me with that, right? Or maybe it's something a little bit different. Maybe it's less customer facing, it's more internal. So I'm managing my opportunities in my CRM. And I say, hey, which of my opportunities did I change last week? What was the value of that? So that I can forecast the number correctly back to the business. And normally I would go through the CRM and I would go through all the use cases and the opportunities I've built. But I want to say just ask a question and get a quick answer, right?
Yeah, I understand now. I understand because I have when you're selling, like really complicated and complex product in terms of complicated, I mean, not in terms of, like one function use or like interface, but it could be many use cases. And I'm also like selling this document management system, and it's like a lot of like maybe like thousands of use cases. This client, like want this one, this client want this one, and it's kind of maybe new request, and it's like might be somewhere in the system, but to teach the new sales manager, it takes like maybe a year before he will be able to, like, create some answer, maybe not even best one. And we also like we're doing this knowledge base. It's not too much on AI yet, but like it's really, like difficult to extract it and to teach the sales managers. And even experienced one, it will be faster for them to answer
Yeah.
the question about the system when it's complex system and some different requests from the client. Yeah, I understand now.
Yeah, you could ask a question like, "What is what service is being adopted the fastest by my customers and why?" Right?
Mhm,
Okay, cool. It's this little module here that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise noticed,
mhm,
and then it gives me some context as to why, because
mhm,
it's
mhm,
relevant because there's this new, regulatory thing coming down that I didn't
mhm,
maybe know about. Or there's the feature to, install or leverage is quite simple and the
mhm.
value proposition is high. Okay. It's
Very
those
good.
types of things. Yep. Very well. Yeah. And then, look, it's also not just, it's not us eating our own dog food, right? That Snowflake Intelligence has only been generally available for about 3 months. And, a massive amount of customers are using this. And, there's a quote from Red Bull, which I think is great. Makes me think of the F1 cars, right? Like, what if you could ask a question of what's happening of the car in real time, and or after the fact, right? You can start to interrogate when this happened. What was the result of that? Why? Things get really very cool. The last one I'll talk about as we start to wrap up is Cortex Code, which we have. I guess it's adopted the name Coco, right? So a bit of a fun name. I think Coco is a real cool one, right? Because probably the fastest growing sliver in all of the AI market is these coding agents, right? It's very clear that they can provide immense value very quickly to users. And we see that with, say, OpenAI's got Codex. We've seen Cursor, right? Google's come out with anti-gravity. We had Microsoft, like the GitHub Copilot, Claude Code, and the success
Mhm,
it's had. We have Cortex Code or Coco. It's fundamentally different in that it is grounded inside the Snowflake environment. So again, when I log in, I authenticate my Cocoa environment with Snowflake, right? It's one and the same. So I'm not allowed to do things that my role-based access controls prohibit. I can't go
Mm-hmm.
deleting tables, right? I can't go access data sets that I'm not supposed to see. But
Mm-hmm.
equally, I don't have to set my coding agent up and teach it all the APIs and all the best practices of Snowflake. I don't have to teach it how to be a data engineer because it is one. It's grounded in that environment. So this is a super, super powerful tool. Examples of things that you could do with it. It's only been out for, geez, maybe a month. The CLI has been GA thereabouts, and I see my customers all over using it for all these different examples. So I've even in a demo environment, I've used it to create a number of data sets of size, scope, and scale to mimic a general insurance environment. Build me machine learning fraud models over the top of that. Organize all the data with agents with semantic layers over the top, and then surface that all through Snowflake intelligence. So I can try to put myself in the environment of an insurance organization and try to solve problems that they might be solving in real time, and then mimic that environment for demonstration or for best practices or what have you. So I think that's quite amazing. And where I talk about, hey, what's the difference between Cocoa and many of the tools that are out there? I think this is a good demonstration of that, right? It's a coding tool, but it's a coding tool built for the data environment, right? For data engineers, for analysts, for power users, for builders. Yeah, today it's out in a CLI. It's also in the UI of Snowflake itself. I'm partial to the CLI because I like to also give it access to executables in my own environment. So I could have it build PowerPoints for me. I can have it take things from my downloads folder and do data jobs for me and the like. Yeah. Any
Did you do
questions there?
your this presentation using the Snowflake? What you
Do I have a presentation on Cocoa?
did you have? You just said that yeah, I can do some, like
Mhm.
presentations or like some, like infographic maybe. So like the presentation deck, what you present today, did you do some of the tools of Snowflake?
I haven't done it for today, but I built one the other day. I took a business challenge where I see how I talked to Snowflake Intelligence about how not AI inside a company, but how AI outside in an industry is going to change consumer behavior in an industry. And I kind
Mhm.
of went back and forth on kind of what that looks like and what we expect to see changing and the where it's changing, right, with some key data points. And then I asked it to show me a solution of how I could use Snowflake to help build either tools that would give me observations of
Mhm.
how customers are behaving, right? So I could surface that information to a decision maker. But
Mhm.
also, how do I take and build AI ready data sets and then put them in a like an API or surface them in ways, APIs, applications, so on and so forth, that consumer AI tools could start to interact with that information so that they can be grounded in data sets that I want them to see or have available, right? So how can Google AI be grounded in my business information, right? I need to make
Mhm.
that accessible. I can't just expect them to guess. How do I have applications that are integrated into ChatGPT, into Claude, into Gemini, maybe into Grok if they go down that path, so on and so forth. And then so I thought, oh, that's really cool. I like that idea. I like how that kind of can position and help an organization. The solution makes sense to me, and I, went back to make sure I like the solution. And then I told it, build me a prompt for Cocoa on this, and then I took that prompt and I put it in Cocoa, and I had Cocoa build me an executive level PowerPoint that is grounded in the environmental problem, right? The external environment problem, the impact it could have on a business, right? By using their public financial information, the solution, by understanding Snowflake and its best practices and the potential outcomes, again, based on publicly available information and industry data sets. And then I package that into a PowerPoint that I can take into a boardroom. So I'll go through it, right? And because, sometimes the data that comes out is only good as the prompt that goes in, right? And I need to make sure that I'm comfortable with it and all that type of good stuff. I'll be the human in the loop. But I think that's a practical example of, how
Yes.
I would use the tooling to think about challenges in the industry,
Mhm.
solutions that I can help provide a customer, and then put it into a medium that surfaces a discussion that we can all have, at the table on a whiteboard, and try to solve together.
Yeah, that's a good example. Thank you for describing the process, how you using that inside the company. It's like useful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then here I just give you an example of, kind of the power of cocoa, right?
Mhm.
And how the business is using it. And again, it's that layered cake we talked about, although I have it upside down now, but starts with the context. Let's get the data right.
Mhm.
Let's then look at the intelligence, the reasoning, the planning, any skills that we might apply to it, which are just workflows. And then how do we surface that back up to an end user? And in this case, it was being used for root cause analysis. But what really blows my mind is the time difference, right? I'm seeing this across the board with everybody who's adopting the technology. And then with that, I would just say, look, a big thank you for having me on. That's the end of what I'm going to present today. I think there are still many more applications of artificial intelligence that we didn't talk about. There's still more that Snowflake will help enable. And yeah, uh,
I
exciting
think that
times.
who is watching us, our students, they will go to the website. It's like also like a lot of information on the website, what you can look at and learn about Snowflake. But still, I have a few questions,
Mhm.
and if we can, like, go through them. Actually, thank you for a great presentation, and it was really interesting. And in terms of technology, it's so many insights and use cases, how to use it, and much broader, like with about customers and that context is very, like useful. But let me now ask a few follow-up questions, mainly from the point of view of the customers. What
Sure.
companies are really struggling with, where the bottlenecks are. You already told, but we just like a little bit clarifying. And how this transformation grow over the time. And first question, in terms of value chain context. So, like looking across your clients in industries like financial services, healthcare, telecom, maybe manufacturing and others, where do you usually see the biggest pain first? In operations, in customer facing work, or in the way teams and systems connect?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, first and foremost, Snowflake does an excellent job of breaking down data silos. And I think that is still a scenario in which, as customers are seeing the power of AI, there's the saying, there is no AI strategy without a data strategy, right? And so we need to make sure, customers need to make sure, we all need to make sure, right, that the data strategy is a sound strategy, and that means breaking down those silos, creating a single source of truth, and having an interoperable, well-governed environment so that you can start to make your data AI ready. And I think that's the first stepping stone, and a lot of organizations have been taking that leap with us.
Yeah, but it's from your point of view that let's do, like structure the data. But clients, as they know, they don't come and just, let's structure the data. They come in with like some, like let's do AI, like, and in my experience, correct me if I'm wrong, everybody's starting with this customer facing work, like to use AI instead of operations. But after they move to operations, because it's maybe easier, like, and giving effects much faster. But it's like, correct me if I'm wrong. So like that's why I'm asking you, like when they come into you, what they want, like let's implement AI where?
Yeah. So where are they implementing AI first, right? I think probably a couple different things I see. I think there are many areas by which they are doing POCs to learn how to best implement AI and build the processes so that they can then roll it out and scale it to larger groups. I think the risk profile of delivering it to your customer base is quite high because you have reputational risk or this that and the other, and we've seen plenty of examples where somebody rolled something out, it didn't work the way they wanted, and then they got egg on their face. I think when people are first starting, they want to get comfortable with the technology, get comfortable to make sure they have the processes in place, so they look at it internally first. Then which division do they go about using it in? I think what I would say is coding agents is a clear winner, and we can see that literally from the industry. Cursor wouldn't exist, right? If there wasn't this
Yeah.
kind of vibe coding. So I think that's a clear starting point for many organizations on
Mm,
how okay, we're starting with the technology here as a coding tool and we're applying it. I
mm,
tend to think, when it's Snowflake, finance is an excellent starting point because you can very quickly use the Cortex analysts to interrogate your structured data sets, right? And
mm,
ask questions of the data and get explainable answers out. And that's an area where there's a lot of BI dashboards already in finance.
mm,
And there's always a second or third level of questions that
mm.
takes place when looking at the numbers. So I think, applying Snowflake intelligence to financial questions, queries, use cases becomes a really powerful tool that can help an organization quickly not just build trust in the technology, but find out where their own gaps and their people and processes are so that they can think about how to best leverage the technology and their own staff to operationalize something, and then how would they bring it out to the other teams.
And they assume that a client comes with like one I would say request or problem, and after that they kind of like expanded what you just said, and at what point does it become clear that it's not just here we need to like solve some problem or increase efficiency, but we need to take at a broader picture? At what point clients understand that they need to structure to get data to like get some other like and go deeper actually in this process? At what point usually it's happening?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I think when people first start to say, "Oh, I'm going to use AI to talk to my data," they very quickly realize that, geez, I need to make sure that I have highly curated data. And that becomes part of the question and answer. Like, I'm going to go give it to finance. What data does finance need? Okay, do I have the data sets available?
Mhm.
Okay, have I made those data sets AI ready? Right? Do I have a high level of data quality? And I think those questions become readily apparent very quick because if the data is very messy, then you have AI reasoning over messy data, and that becomes much harder to get a very good response
Yeah.
over AI reasoning over very highly curated clean data. So I think it comes up really quick. Yeah, I
And
don't think it's something that like forethought, right? That's I'm trying to say.
your presentation showed this very clearly. Data spread across clouds, regions, formats, systems, and teams, plus the challenge of connecting structured and unstructured information. So, and what
Mhm.
types of data are most often stuck in silos today?
Yeah, that's a I don't know if there's a good one answer to that because I think it's every organization is different, right? And so the types of data they have will be, different based on their business model, really. I think if you have a small, it's how many data sources do you have? What's the variety of the data sources? And then what is the kind of culture of my business? Is it very common for people to just go sign up for things and use them, or very common for them to put everything into spreadsheets or G drives, or do they have much more policies and infrastructure, and how do they go about doing things?
Mhm.
And then I think you have the also the challenge of, is my business 150 years old? And I've got tech debt kind of at all layers, or am I a brand new company and I'm a digitally native company that already has all these kind of connectors, so it's very easy for me to kind of plug in because my business just doesn't have that level of maturity.
I'm just wondering about, for example, if we take banks, in my view, it's they, as I know from my limited knowledge, it's one of the most digitalized industry where like should be all data in place. Is it like true, or also they have some data missed in general?
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if I can speak specific to the banking industry, but I think generally speaking, as people adopt a technology, say they're adopting Snowflake, and they put a strategy and process together, right? And as they execute that process, the more mature or the longer down that path that they get, they have the
Mhm.
ability to deliver value back to the business at a faster rate. And that could be anything from, say, analytics, right? To, yes, today we're talking quite a bit about generative AI. When the business sees the value that's being created by executing the data strategy, right? I think that creates a virtuous cycle because then people say, okay, well, it's not just there's a data strategy and I don't quite understand it, but there's a data strategy taking place, and because that's taking place, I can do X, and then
Uh-huh.
X makes value. And then all of a sudden it becomes real, and you get more people wanting to participate and
Uh-huh.
lean into the strategy. And I think that becomes a really powerful tool.
Okay, and about challenges a little bit. Is the harder challenge usually structured data, unstructured data, like documents, emails, transcripts, and internal knowledge? So for you, for company, for you, when you're talking the structured data or unstructured data is like represent more challenging
Sure.
to
I think
implement.
historically, structured data is easier to work with, and the reason for that is, look, we've had databases for a long time, right? Like Oracle has built a massive organization around this. So we have a lot of structured, relational databases out there. And
Uh-huh.
then we've been building tools on top of that and machine learning models to work with that data. So I think that process has been very well defined and matured over the decades. And unstructured data is more of the next frontier. Not to say it's a brand new challenge, but it's a challenge that we haven't been solving at scale for the same amount of time as an industry. So in that kind of frame of reference, I would say, the tooling and the power behind working with structured data is quite strong. The I don't want to say the tooling and the processes don't exist for unstructured data, because they very much do, but perhaps they're not quite as mature, and that world is still evolving at a little bit of a faster rate. And many companies are now saying, okay, well, I've got all my databases. I've worked with structured data for a long time, so I have my processes put together. Yes, I have the technology to deal with unstructured data, but I'm still working through all the business outcomes that I can derive from working with that unstructured data. And that's kind of the change, right? And we see that with, say, customers. You know, it used to be, when you worked with a customer, you'd do a transaction in one way, right? Now the world has become multi-channel. So transactions happen through various mediums. We interact with companies through numerous mediums now, from video chats to text to phone call. So there are so many different modalities by which we're starting to digitize our lives, that the unstructured data set is kind of growing at this really rapid pace. And then we're looking back on it and saying, okay, now what do we ask of that data? And then how do we take and transform that data to get to the right solutions? So I feel like that's a bit more of the question at hand, that's a little bit more nuanced in structured data.
Thank you, and let's move to the numbers, maybe operational and economic impact. So your example showed outcomes like overhead savings, ROI, retention, faster root cause analysis, and better support for teams. So let's talk about what matters most from the customer side. So when clients look at the results, what metrics matter most to them in real life? Cost, speed, productivity, accuracy, or something else?
Yeah, big question. I think I tend to use this analogy. As human beings, we can deal with chronic pain for a long time to avoid, right? And so I tend to find that people will kind of trudge along with something to avoid like a real bad scenario. And so when we look at ROI, it's how do we start to address those really bad scenarios or make sure that they never happen. And I think that tends to be where an organization will go. So I have this impending thing, whatever that is, to put a plan in place so that we don't experience the pain that would happen from that. And that becomes the point of attention. So that's kind of what I would say is my first thought as somebody who's worked in enterprise sales for a long period of time. Now, I do think that with the technology coming out and the way that you can use data, the better you bring data together, right? The more it opens up in terms for better understanding your customer and looking for new ways to, I'll call it, increase their happiness, right? Provide more value to the customer. Typically, as an output of that, it could be higher top line revenue, better profitability, more loyal customer, all those types of things. And then equally, you can look at it from the other side to say, okay, well, if I have a better purview of my customer, how do I avoid those acute pains like customer churn, right? Customer complaints, a very, very angry customer. How do I not take on a customer that is a high level of risk, right? And is actually looks really good, but in reality, it's going to cost me a ton of money. It's actually not a good
Mhm.
customer to have. So that's kind of what I mean by the two things. As you bring things together, it's like you can look at the two sides of the coin. But I think human nature is to reduce the pain first. But it also depends a lot on an organization. A young organization may be very very focused on capturing market share and growth, and so
Yeah.
that's the reason for how do I look at the data sets and how do I pull them together and how do I derive that value because that's my ultimate goal. So, end of the day, understand your technology, understand your people's process, and your ability to apply the technology. And then any project you work on, make sure you ground it in your OKRs or the KPI that the business is using to operate under so that you're creating value for your stakeholders.
And for example, like when they see value from maybe they start with one process, like see the value, and do they right away want to, like expand it to
Sure.
other products?
Yeah, again, I think that's an organizational thing. If it's kept in isolation and nobody knows about it, then the only people who want to do more are the people who are impacted by it. If it's a project that has strategic importance and the right stakeholders at the board level, the C-suite level, the head of level, right? Then naturally, when it has a positive outcome, there will be more momentum behind it because the strategic importance of the use case is magnified, right? It's more disruptive or positive to the business.
Yeah, I saw that actually maybe like I rephrased my question, the level of excitement when people see, like it's like much for them. What I saw when it's like working.
I think as long as you always, if I go back to grounding in the company's OKRs, right, the objectives and key results, or the KPIs at the highest level, means that what you're doing is strategic to the business and providing value, and that creates a lot of momentum and value. Whereas if it's I used it to do this one thing, right? Okay, cool. I'm going to be excited about it, and some of my peers might think it's really cool, but
Uh-huh.
it lives in that little isolation. But if I focus on a project that my CEO cares about, my stakeholders care about, right, my shareholders care about, and I worked on something that provided value all the way up that value chain, then of course it'll have uh, a lot more excitement about it, and people will be much more eager to adapt or adopt.
So, and let's move to last section about the talk a little bit, talk about future. So, like you already touched that topic, like at some point, when you're working on the disruption.
My dog's barking here. Apologies.
Yeah, like he's tired. It's like 2 minutes more, maybe like 3 minutes. So just
Yeah.
I will repeat that question. So
Yeah.
let's move to the future now and last section and talk what will happen like later. Looking ahead after companies connect their data, start using AI at scale. What do you think the next big challenge will be for the companies?
Well, it's a great question. Yeah, I think trying to think the best way to answer this. I think the technology continues to advance at a really rapid pace. So I think there's a natural the technology is going to advance at one rate, and the rate of diffusion, right, or adoption of the technology will happen at another rate. I think there's a natural challenge there to say how quickly can you adopt and at what pace or rate should you adopt, right? If the rate is really fast and your competitors and they are disrupting you or the industry,
Uh-huh.
that could be a challenge. If the regulatory environment is such that it slows the rate of adoption, that could actually be a good thing, right? Gives you more time for the technology to mature, to understand how to best use it. So I think there's going to be that natural challenge there, I suppose, of the rate of diffusion of the technology and the impact on the industry. I also think there'll be the probably the technology challenges of okay, now I have this proliferation of agents. What's the best way to manage them at scale, right? I think that's a natural question that'll come up, and then I think there's probably more like industry wide, questions that are more well, what's the impact on jobs? What jobs are being created, right? And then how does that impact me running a business? How do I manage that, right? Is the technology changing the way I manage my hiring? Is it changing the way that like the skills that I need my workforce to have? How do I enable them and how do I bring them up to speed? How do I make them more productive? I think those are all really big questions as well.
Yeah, great overview. Yeah, it's like we need to take a look and watch now, like everything what's changing, but it's a lot of information. So
Yeah.
we need also like how to be able to look at that. And last question for our students, like future entrepreneurs, like what will you advise from your big experience in working with clients for entrepreneurs building in this space? How can they recognize a real enterprise problem worth solving?
Yeah, I am going to give maybe a contrarian answer here. And my answer is that is it worth your time to go solve the enterprise problem, or can you actually redefine the enterprise faster? And if I'm a startup, and what I mean by that is, okay, if I identify a problem, and this is a meaningful problem in my industry, maybe I can solve it with technology, and then I go
Mhm.
sell it to a company. And then, of course, I need that company to adopt it and to roll it out and to recognize the value. And I go through that sales process and customer success. Cool, I built a business. I'm selling a tool into a bigger environment. Or do I just say, could I actually disrupt that environment by building a competitor to that company
Mhm.
that leverages the tooling and the IP that I've built and move at an even faster rate than the enterprise could adopt the technology? And I think if I'm an entrepreneur, that would be a question that I would ask myself. Um, you know, is it worth solving the problem for the company, or is it worth just reinventing the company and doing it myself?
Yeah, that's a great point, by the way. Great view from another angle. In some industry, it's possible. Of course, maybe you cannot build like energy company because it's very capital intensive, but to do some construction or like development company or some service company, it's really worth to look at that. It's really great advice. Thank you very much, Joe. One more time, I'm very appreciated that you prepared such a great presentation from many, like points of view, consider it and describe like and cases and technology. So I think it very valuable for our students and it was great to have you here and have a good day.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. If anyone has any questions or I can ever be of help, feel free to reach out. And thanks again for the opportunity. Cheers.
So if you're okay, we can organize at some point maybe a live session with questions later. So, and see everybody at the next podcast, next model. Thank you for watching us and have a good day also.